This morning, like every morning since the recent killing of another black man by a white police officer in Minneapolis, I've woken up with a heavy heart. The senseless death of George Floyd has been a tipping point for a nation in crisis. We face a healthcare crisis, an economic crisis, a political crisis, and ultimately a moral crisis. Last week, we saw the number of COVID-19 deaths rise above 100,000, a majority of whom were people of color. Millions of Americans are unemployed or underemployed, a staggering number which we haven't seen since the 1930s. Again, a majority of whom are people of color. And the death of George Floyd was not simply an isolated event, but rather a common occurrence for Black and brown people whose lived experience is a system that disregards their lives. In the days since George Floyd was murdered, we have witnessed an amazing expression of collective grief, anger, and outrage over systemic and pervasive racism that has been festering since the earliest days of our nation. People have taken to the streets, demanding justice and declaring no more. This is our moment of truth. Will we face our demons with courage and clarity? Or will we continue to ignore the cries of our brothers and sisters who desperately want to be seen and heard? Will we live up to our highest ideals as Americans and uplift those who have been intentionally left at the margins of our society? Shinran Shonin, the founder of Shin Buddhism, opened up a path of spiritual liberation for all people who were deemed unworthy by society. His radical message of universal compassion still resonates almost 800 years later, and it is the medicine for the spiritual and moral sickness we suffer from. In these difficult times, I commit to listening, to learning, and self-reflecting on my own greed, hatred, and ignorance, as well as my privilege and complicity in an unjust system. And I vow to renew my commitment to addressing the root causes of systemic racism and white supremacy that is poisoning our hearts and minds and is killing fellow Americans. Our elected leaders have failed us, and people all across our nation are rising up to say that we can and must do better. We need to elect leaders who will act compassionately and have the moral clarity to seek justice and who will work for the welfare of all people. We deserve better. This candle is lit in memory of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and countless others whose lives have been cut short by our failings as a nation. May their light continue to inspire us to work for real and lasting change because their lives mattered. Black lives matter. Wisdom unfolding as compassion is not passive or soft, but rather is dynamic activity that challenges our assumptions, makes us uncomfortable, and helps us to reveal our true selves. Self-reflection is the hard work of spiritual liberation, which is the catalyst for change and growth. We are being called to do better. We are being called to be better. May the light of all-inclusive wisdom and all-embracing compassion illuminate our journey on this difficult path to peace and justice. Let's journey together in solidarity as fellow travelers. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.